There are some tricks when you start working over thick denim seams. And I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite on the Pfaff Quilt Ambition 630 sewing machine. So before I do anything, I'm going to just create a seam that we're going to turn into a very thick bulk when we start to kind of bring it up at the bottom. So I'm going to just go ahead and sew in kind of a thickness, kind of what you would normally have sewn with two different pieces together. And then as you find yourself opening that up and then folding it up, so we're talking about going through and turning this up once and twice. We're looking at 9 layers of fabric right here. So there are a few things that can make life easier. Now, one thing before we go on, I love to have my students do this because your foot number 3 that comes with this machine is a great foot to do a little extra top stitching. Because of this adjustable blade, I'm going to have you move it so that blade's kind of in the center. So right now your needle is also in the center. Make sure you have the IDT pulled down and engaged. That will assist in pulling everything through. So as you slide your fabric in and you put the red marker right in the groove, what we can do is move the needle to the left needle position because I've actually got the thickness of this seam over here and underneath to the left side. So if you just come up to your screen and move the needle position over a couple notches, just depends how far over you want it to stitch, and then just follow that guide right down the seam as you stitch. You can use your foot control or the start stop button, whichever works easiest for you. But I want to show you something about this stitch. Once we have it through, now let's see here, 3 layers of fabric, so not a lot just yet, but we are finding that the stitches are starting to get little tiny. Now, isn't that pretty? Look how straight that went right along that seam. That's what we're talking about, top stitching, having something to follow like that particular guide. Now, there are other feet Pfaff offers that is just a standard guide through the middle. That's a great one for like stitching in the ditch, but you've got 29 needle positions that you can utilize and get it to be the exact distance from the center, left or right, whichever way you want to go. So back to those little tiny stitches. When I'm working on a thicker fabric, the key is making the stitch length longer. So when we're going over that thick denim seam next, you're going to find that when you start to go over those 9 layers, if you ever have to feel like you're pushing the fabric or it's not going through or you push it so much you break a needle, that is one reason you want to make sure to lengthen out your stitch length. Now there is one other tool, and it also comes with this machine, is the multi-purpose tool. This is going to help us get up and over the seam without the stitches changing stitch length. You'll love this. First off, this has 2 different thicknesses, a thinner side and a thicker side. Today I'm going to just use the thinner side. Even though it will feel thick, we'll save that for the super thick sides. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my fabric once and twice. Now the common thing for you to do, and most people do this, is they sew from the back side because then they can see this line. But do you know there's a reason they call it top stitching? Is because it looks better if it is sewn from the top side. Your stitches will actually, it's nothing wrong with your machine, but they will kind of change the location of how that stitch is going to look on the back because it's got to go through all this weave of the fabric. Your needle kind of deflects a little to the left, a little to the right, as it works its way through all those layers. So if you want the prettiest looking stitch, make sure you're always sewing from the top side. So this longer stitch is going to nicely pull the fabric through. I want you to set your machine so the needle stops in the down position. So this little button at the top, needle down. So that way when we do get to where you are seeing this foot angle up, you can lift up the presser foot, take the multi-purpose tool, and slide it underneath the foot, but only as far in as the seam allows you to go. With this tool in place, lower down your presser foot, and you'll find that your foot is now nice and level. That is the key of a presser foot. It doesn't care how much fabric is underneath here. As long as it's level, you're going to see that it will guide it. I always feel like I should hold it, but I don't. It will guide it nice and even. And if you feel like you're going to get a long stitch off the front side, do the same thing. Lift up the presser foot, slide the tool up to the seam, level out the foot, and then just continue to stitch. And of course, don't stitch too far that you stitch into the tool. I almost got a little too close. By the way, your machine will stitch through this, so just so you know. All right, but let's take a look at how wonderful this stitch looks. And did you see that I didn't have to work really hard as I was trying to get it to go up and over that really thick distance? But look how even the stitches are. So I hope I've given you a couple tips. So tools that you can use, other feet you can use for other things that came with your machine, like the number 3 foot for some wonderful edge stitch qualities, and that lengthening out your stitch length can make all the difference in the world.